I'm so alone at this moment, and uh, I can't tell anyone. I can't tell the cops. Like, I can't tell my family. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do. I'm waiting for their phone call. My face is a mess. Like, I can't leave my apartment. I'm waiting for their phone call, and I'm trying to strategize and apply logic to this. And I don't know what I'm gonna say. Like, I'm in so much trouble.
What's up, everyone? It's Justin Kahn. Welcome to The Quest, my podcast where I dive into the ups and downs of trailblazers around me to help you figure out life and get to where you want to be. Before we get started, make sure to smash subscribe and bang that bell, and I'll be your best friend forever. Today, my guest is Molly Bloom. Molly was a competitive skier and was supposed to end up in law school, but guess what? She started running the biggest underground high-stakes poker game in the world. Her story got turned into a movie, Molly's Game, which was nominated for an Oscar. I loved how our conversation went deep on vulnerability and healing. Here's the episode. Enjoy. Molly, thanks for coming. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. And
I'm excited to be here.
I think your story is like one of the most wild rides. It reminds me of my own story of entrepreneurship and just how you would never have predicted like all the different twists and turns that happen. But for my audience who maybe they haven't seen the movie yet or read the book, I encourage them to. It's like an amazing story, but maybe we could just start with you and your kind of story becoming like the mastermind behind the biggest poker games in LA and New York. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was not what I thought, where I thought I would end up, but I think a lot of us have that story. I grew up in this like very normal small town in Colorado. It was actually called Loveland, Colorado. And, two brothers, we love skiing more than anything in the world. We would go up skiing on the weekends with our family. We all got really into mogul skiing. We started competing. And it got really serious really fast for all of us. And then at 12 years old, everything changed in my world. I got diagnosed with really severe scoliosis, and the doctors basically had to sort of reconstruct my spine, and they were like, no shot with mogul skiing anymore. But I just still really wanted to do it. And so, I got back on the mountain with all that entails. And I worked really hard, and I ended up making the US ski team, and I became ranked like third overall in North America. And I made it all the way to the Olympic qualifiers. And this is this pivotal point in my life, And if you've seen the movie, I crashed really hard right before the bottom air. And that kind of changed my whole trajectory. I was finishing undergrad and applying to law school, but, I was really heartbroken that I had to retire from the team. And so I just decided I was going to go somewhere for a year and just be a kid, because I'd had this very serious regimented life. And then I would go back to school. I never thought I would stay. And so I went to LA for a year just because it's a good place to go be a kid.
It's a fun place.
It's fun. I ended up working for this guy. He was very wealthy and very powerful and pretty mean. But I was learning a lot. I was like learning a lot about finance and deals. And then one night he asked me to serve drinks at his poker game. And I show up to this poker game, and it's just mind-blowing, the people that start to walk through the door. It's like Ben Affleck and Leo DiCaprio, but beyond that, like a politician that everybody knows, and one of the heads of one of the biggest owners of one of the biggest investment banks in the world, and one of the heads of the biggest studio and movie studio. And so just one after another, these people who truly moved the world, and I was like, I want to stay in this room. This is super compelling. I'm a 20-something-year-old kid from Loveland, Colorado. Like, all of a sudden I have the immediate access to information and capital and power. And I was just like, I found it so compelling. And so I learned about poker and whatever. And then the more that I learned about these games and the more that I saw the power that they sort of yielded over these people, I was like, I want to own this game. I want to start my own games. And then that's kind of how I got into the poker world and ended up running the biggest underground high stakes poker games in the world for 8 years in New York and LA, and then got in some trouble, and here we are.
So I wanted to go back to, when you were a competitive ski racer and kind of your family. When I read it in the book, it seemed to me, and, I'd love to hear your side of it, is like, it seemed to me like you had a lot to prove, like to your family,
I did.
to your dad, to your brothers. And I really resonated with that in part of the book, because I was like, that was the primary motivator for me making my way in the world for the first 36 years of my life, was like, I've got something to prove. Yeah. And I wanted people to know who I was, and I wanted to prove that I was like good enough to get the approval of the peers that I didn't feel like I got when I was a kid, Yeah. And so I guess I wanted to hear about that drive, for you, and like how you felt like that shaped your experience both in skiing and then in poker afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it came from a lack as well. I have my two younger brothers are incredible human beings, and just incredibly talented in very specific ways, and they were just from the get-go. So Jeremy, my youngest brother, is just an athletic phenom. He ended up competing in 2 Olympics. He was world champ 6 times in a row in skiing, and then went on to the NFL Combine, got drafted 5th round of the Philadelphia Eagles. He went on to then start this charity, this really prolific charity, and raised, $80 million for a startup. So that's my little brother, who's this athletic phenom when we were growing up. And in my family, sports and academics were everything. And then my middle brother is just a certifiable genius. I mean, he is now an adjunct professor at Harvard, and a cardiothoracic surgeon at Mass Gen. And, he's just super brilliant. And that was my dinner table, and I wasn't so skilled in such a specific way. And I really, I wanted a seat at that table. I wanted to get the same sort of attention and love that my brothers were getting. And I tried it with skiing. And then, I was headed to law school because that was the other way. And, just major life interruption. And I come upon this poker game, and a couple of things happened. First of all, this is, I was primed for a rebellion. Against my family, against the world. I was just primed for a rebellion. And so, and then the other thing is I realized that in those, months and years that I was an entrepreneur, and that was my thing. But when I was growing up, that wasn't really a thing that you set out to be, that's a newer phenomenon. And so, I was trying to fit myself into this very small box. And as soon as I started to run my own business, I realized that this is what I'm good at. But yeah, I was driven just blindly by this desire, this unquenchable desire to prove myself in the world probably because of my childhood and the brothers that I grew up with.
How did that manifest in your poker career? Like I remember, there's so much that resonates about your career, and with me, it's like when I started off, I remember thinking, I was just doing something cool. Like I was like, oh, I want to create this cool app. At the time, it was like us trying to create our own live video stream of our lives. And so we built all this technology for it. But I remember having this conversation with my co-founder and saying, if we could each make $1 million in this industry, like that would be incredible, right? Like over our, the next couple of years or whatever. And, that was like almost like a mind blowing goal at the time. And then we did it, and we crushed that. And then it just became normal, right? It was like, we sold the company for $60 million, and then that was like normal. And then we were like, I was always looking up at like, what can I do better? And like, I always felt like this scarcity, like I didn't have enough. It seemed like you went through this journey where you were learning about poker. It was kind of a curiosity and seeing like this amazing world. And then you're growing in it, and then you grew bigger and bigger, and and then you suffered defeats. And I'd love for you to tell the story about like some of those stories about like, having to move from LA to New York, but then even doing it bigger. But then it was like, it almost seemed from, reading the subtext in your book, it's like that it wasn't enough. You just wanted to keep going.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, it's interesting. There were so many incredible lessons to building this game. And one of I think the most prolific lessons comes from that. When you're coming from that place of lack and never enough, it can really lead you down this path of being incredibly growth oriented, and incredibly creative and outside the box in terms of how you build and you scale your business. In LA, as soon as I realized I wanted to own these games, and I wanted to own it for the poker, but more than that, it was this networking rocket ship. This game could get me into any subset of society that I wanted at the top level. There were 9 seats at the table. Everybody wanted to play at this game because it was their opportunity to not only play very exciting poker, but to play with people that everybody wants an audience with, and so owning this game was an incredibly profound way to gain power really quickly and agency. And if you've ever spent any time in LA, there's no place other than maybe New York that will make you feel like a nobody like LA and New York, And so that's like family, feeling like, I was kind of a nobody in my family, and then getting to LA and seeing all these larger people than life, and just feeling sick of being powerless, feeling sick of like being on the sidelines. And all of a sudden I stumble into this opportunity, and here are all these people, and they're larger than life. And not only that, when you have chips, when you have this like type of economic system with chips, people throw around money like it's, they don't, it distorts the value of it, right? So I'm making like, $3,000 the first night for refilling a couple of Diet Cokes. Plus I'm exposed to the inner dialogue, to this real candid dialogue between these fascinating people. And I'm just, I'm so in. And so in order to build it, in order to cross that chasm between being a cocktail waitress at these games and then actually owning and operating these games, I just got super focused on the details. How can we break down this experience from A to Z and look at the little ways that I can upgrade the experience? And then the other thing I did was I grew up, my dad's a shrink, which is a nightmare when you're a kid at the dinner table. You get away with literally nothing, right? But it trained me to think about the world in this way, to investigate human beings and how they operate, and to be very curious, like we were talking about before, about who they are, what they care about, and how you can improve their experience. And so, I kind of went at it from this very detail-oriented way, where I was like, okay, this isn't just a poker game. This is an experience. This is an experience of escapism, where these people get to come and show up and disappear from their lives into another world, And so I started really building on that. I wanted to really focus on world building and, moving the games to the penthouse suite at the Four Seasons, and, the top shelf everything, and the right playlist, and the right, staff that knows details about your life. And so that really worked in LA, this very this commitment to understanding people's psychology and then tweaking the details to amplify the experience.
Man, I want to talk about that. There's so much in here. So tell me about how at that point it kind of all fell apart for you.
Okay, so it was multifactorial, but there. So the first thing that happened in New York was, like I said, I had expanded so much. I was really trying to build an empire, and I'd kind of gotten off course from my original plan, which was make a lot of money, make a lot of contacts, and get out. And so, but I just was so caught up, and the money was insane. So anyway.
Like how much were you making a year at that point?
$5 million a year after
That's incredible.
taxes. Yeah.
And this is like primarily tips. People were tipping,
Yeah.
or like were they paying to play the game?
So the structure was tipping, but like I said, by this point, I'm extending all the credit, and also there are 9 seats, and everyone wants to get in this game. So, the winners would tip a significant portion of their tips. I mean, of their winnings to me. Losers didn't have to tip, but the winners would if they wanted an invite the next week and if they wanted credit.
Yeah.
So, um, so the first thing that happened was I had this driver that I really really trusted. He was with me in New York and in LA, and so he said to me, I know these guys, these Jersey hedge fund guys, and they want to play in your game. And of course, I was always looking for leads, so I said, great, have them meet me, at the Four Seasons Midtown bar. Um, and they show up, and I mean, it was like a scene out of a movie. They were definitely not hedge fund guys. They were organized crime, Italian. And it was like this very awkward exchange. But basically, what they said to me is, look, what you've built is incredible, and you have to give us a piece. Um,
Yeah.
and I'd seen all the movies, right? Goodfellas. Like I watched all the seasons of The Sopranos. I was like, this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm not going to go into business with the Italian mob. So I turned down their offer, and they kept, kind of hitting me up, and this one guy that had been there kept hitting me up, and I just kept avoiding it, and it culminated with a super scary, terrible event in which they sent someone to my apartment, and he came in my apartment and he put a gun in my mouth and he beat me up pretty bad, and he basically said it's not an option, anymore. Like,
Yeah.
you either give us a piece or you're done. And that he also said that he knew where my mom lived and he knew her name, so and if I told anyone, he said that he would kill my family. So, I'm so alone at this moment. And I can't tell anyone, I can't tell the cops, like I can't tell my family. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do. I'm waiting for their phone call. My face is a mess. Like I can't leave my apartment. I'm waiting for their phone call, and I'm trying to strategize and apply logic to this, and I don't know what I'm going to say. Like I'm in so much trouble. I'm in so
Yeah.
many ways, and by this time, a drinking and a recreational, like, weekend drug habit had turned into an utter total dependence on booze and pills. So I was I was just kind of screwed all around. So the second week, I got the New York Times, and on the cover it said 125 people arrested, the biggest mob-related takedown in New York City history. So I never heard from them again. I assume that they got either rounded up in that sort of indictment, or they felt there was too much heat. I'm not sure, but so that one kind of uh, got
That w-
resolved. Yeah, and
so
then
that was like you couldn't go to the police. You felt like you couldn't go to the police though, even though you
no,
were paying taxes and this was legal. It wasn't, you weren't taking a rake. It was like a legal
not yet.
game, and
Yeah,
that it was a tipping based.
yeah, yeah.
But but like it just, you felt like you didn't have any, you didn't know what you were gonna do, and then like that was kind of like the luckiest break ever, I guess.
Ever, ever. Because I really, I had no answers. I didn't, I, I didn't know. Um, and then, like a crazy person, I went back to running games. Uh, because at that point, my rationale was like, I have at least $3 million on the street right now that no one will ever pay if I stop running games, because that's the nature of gamblers. So I just have to collect this money and then I'll get out, right? It was always this justification. And the second thing that happened was, I got a little lazy and sloppy about how much I was vetting these people. And there are these Russian American businessmen from Brighton Beach. And I had my private investigator kind of like gloss over and look at and everything checked out. But um, there's a gut feeling that it wasn't right. And it turns out they were running the biggest insurance fraud scheme in New York City history. And they had deep ties to the Russian mob, like back in Moscow. So the, the feds were, yeah, I obviously don't have a talent for recruitment, so that won't be in my future. Um, so I from that, and the feds were onto them, and so now they're paying close attention to this game. Um, and then the last thing I did, so they sent in a confidential informant to the games, and like we said, for 7.5 years I was doing this thing legally. I had retained really top um, defense attorneys on both coasts to analyze the federal statutes, and they're like, everything looks good, just don't take a rake, don't take a percentage of each pot like Vegas. And you know I got, by this point I just thought I was like bulletproof, and I was like, yeah, but I have so much exposure and blah blah blah, like I there's some games where it makes sense, financial sense, to take a rake, and so that's what I started doing. And the CI clocked that, and that was that. And then the FBI raided one of my games I wasn't at. I had multiple games running per night in the city by that point, and I wasn't at that game, but that my dealer texted me and was like, "The FBI's here looking for you. Don't come here." And in that moment, finally, I knew it was game over. You know, um,
I want to talk about that with you too, actually, with like what
yeah,
has happened since then. So I saw this Instagram post that you did about the last decade, and going
yeah,
through getting indicted and then selling, or maybe this is the wrong order, but like selling the book deal, and or writing or trying to get a book deal, being rejected, then finally
mhm,
selling it, getting indicted, and then um, it sounds like you've been on quite a journey then after that, and like going through kind of highs and lows. And I'd love to learn like what happens after the
yeah,
book ends.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so it's very interesting. I had to end the book abruptly and incompletely because the
Yeah.
publisher wanted it,
Yeah.
and the story hadn't sort of, hadn't resolved yet because I was still waiting to be sentenced
Yeah.
in federal court. So after the feds raided that game and seized all my assets in 2011, my lawyers reached out, and interesting thing, your property, unlike your person, does not have the presumption of innocence.
Yeah.
So there's this thing called asset forfeiture, where they can just take it, and that's what happened. And I didn't want to go on record about anything, and so I just went away, and then tried to put my life back together, went to rehab, and then 2 years later I had finally gotten a job. It took me so long to get a job. Nobody wanted to take my call. The tabloids were covering this stuff, and the people on the street knew that the feds had been involved, and so no one wanted to hire me. And finally I got a job 2 years later, and I'd been working on this book. And I moved back to LA. 5 days after I moved back, I get arrested. 17 FBI agents, semi-automatic weapons, the whole thing. And they put this piece of paper in front of me that says the United States of America versus Molly Bloom. Just
Oh my
a
God.
shocking, like, surreal moment, but super unexpected because I hadn't run a game for 2 years. I'd been living this quiet life. And I didn't know that what they do during that time is they build a case against you. They're building their case. So anyway, the feds want me to cooperate. They want me to be a confidential informant for them. Particularly, their particular interests were the Wall Street people, the politicians, and the celebrities.
Yeah.
And that they offered me a good deal of we'll give all your money back, keep you out of prison. But, you know, I was in this place because of me, period, end. No one else made the choices. No one forced me to do it. I had made these decisions, having all the opportunities in the world. So I just really knew I needed to stand up for the consequences, and that's how I needed to get through it. You know, I think after you make money, you realize you can make money again.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't exactly know how that was going to work, but you know, once you kind of go through that, you realize that you can do it again. I couldn't ruin people's lives because I had made some bad choices. So anyway, got sentenced, didn't have to go to jail, thank God. But then, you know, I'm in this place where like, I'm 35 years old. I'm millions of dollars in debt. I'm now a convicted felon. My reputation is destroyed. I how do I get out of this gutter? You know? And so I really thought that I treated it almost like a startup, you know, what the reinvention is the startup now, like saving your own life. And when I kind of, you know, took real inventory, I realized that the monetizable asset was the story. It
Yeah.
was a unique story. Usually this is the type of story that involves a male lead, you know? And so I knew it was a unique story. So did a lot of research about New York publishing, and then went to Hollywood, and nobody wanted to make this movie, Justin. They were all
Really?
like, they're like, it's a great story, but do you know how many powerful people in DC and LA and New York that played in these games would blackball this movie? Like, it's never getting made.
Huh.
And,
Yeah.
you know, and I was like, all right, well, it's my only way out. So it has to get made. So I researched, I looked at, I took a million meetings, and what I found out about Hollywood is that there is a short list of writers and directors that Hollywood needs more than they need Hollywood, right? So like they
Yeah.
can do whatever they want because they're such a rare commodity. The Steven Spielbergs, the Aaron Sorkins, you know. And so Aaron Sorkin was is my favorite writer. He wrote The Social Network and Moneyball and Few Good Men. Just you know, he was my favorite, and I just knew that if I could get someone like him on this project, that the Frady cats would just comply, you know.
Yeah.
I hoped that was my theory. So I got this meeting with Aaron Sorkin, and you know, went and pitched him my story, and it hit, and he resonated with him, and you know, he made the movie. And so that was the movie gave me, you know, really the second chance.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, it's
I,
crazy that it worked.
I love your, you know, one thing it strikes me is that I really love your entrepreneurial spirit and figuring things out. You know, that idea of like, I feel like it's common between the poker game and then the movie where you're just like, okay, I'm just going to figure out how this world works. And then I'm going
Yeah.
to I have a goal and I'm going to try to build towards that goal. And even starting from, well, nothing in the first case. And then with the movie starting from, you know, $3 million in debt or whatever, like that's an amazing attitude to have.
Yeah. I think that is part of how I find security in a very unsecure world, is focusing on strategy and kind of, you know, being able to figure things out. And you know, but I think as we get to the more spiritual part of the journey, also being able to be a person that needs less safety, you know? So
Yeah.
like because there's no such thing as safety or solid ground in the world. But I think, you know, that entrepreneurial spirit can come from this like deep need to figure things out so that you can have some sense of control in the world, you know? So I think there's an excellent application for it. It just needs to be channeled in the right way. But there's also a part of that is very stressful and, you know,
Yeah. I love it. It's
control
like
heavy.
you have this need in the world to make the world a certain way. And that's like it like powers you and drives you. But then the like meta level, the kind of level beyond that, the next
Yeah,
game is like, can I just let go of my need for the world to be a certain way?
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Man, I love that. It's like, I feel like my own experience is such a parallel to all of this. So by this time,
I felt like that too.
were you sober by the time that you wrote the book?
So I got sober. I had to go to rehab. I consented to go to rehab when everything in my life blew up, and I don't even have a bank account anymore.
Yeah.
So I have to make some sort of pronouncement, and I needed to go. It wasn't okay anymore. I mean, it hadn't been okay for a while, but it's hard, as an athlete, as someone who's very disciplined, to really believe that addiction, alcoholism, whatever, like that it's not something that you can use willpower and discipline to get over.
Yeah.
It's a very humbling experience to not be able to figure it out, but I couldn't. So I went to rehab. I got sober. I stayed sober for until about a week after I got arrested by the FBI. So for the most part, I wrote the book sober, but I would say the last 60 pages, not sober.
Okay.
Which I think the last 60 pages are actually better than the first, however many. So, so yeah, struggling again, but kind of, being able to keep it in check because I'm very laser focused on making my life work. And basically what I'm saying in my head is, this is circumstantial. If I can, when I figure it out, when I cross that line, when I get money again and I can have a bank account, when I have opportunities again, I won't feel this need to numb out, to like obscure my reality,
Yeah.
So sentencing came and went, the book deal came and went, and I'm getting worse, and Aaron Sorkin decides to write this movie. I move and I work with Aaron like almost every day, like 5 days a week for like 8 months working on this movie. And then they all go away to shoot the movie and I'm not involved in that part. And my drug and alcohol use gets out of control.
Yeah.
And if my theory of I just need to wait till I'm okay is correct, then why am I getting worse as I get closer to that demarcation point, And I remember the producers called me and they were like, and I have this, the producer on my movie, I love him, but he's super stoic and he never raves about anything, and he calls me and he's like, the movie's done, and he's like, I didn't know how it was going to turn out, but it's extraordinary. And I waited to be okay, to be, because that triggered a big bank wire that I had negotiated my heart out on for the front end, and and walked away from really prolific people because they wouldn't, give me the dollar number that I believed that I deserved. But I got that bank wire, and the movie's going to come out in 6 months, 6 to 8 months, and it's all set up, right? I should feel better, and I didn't. And I didn't at all. And I felt worse. And so it was in that moment that I realized that everything that I had thought about life, about fulfillment, about happiness was wrong,
Yeah.
So I moved back to Colorado. I moved back to nature. I got real sober. I started meditating every day. I started reading all the books, from psychology books to Buddhist books to practicing the 12 steps, I to neuroscience. I mean, I just did this huge deep dive into, okay, well, clearly I don't have the answers. So where are they? What are they?
Yeah. That's like you're applying your entrepreneurial drive to like figure out like what's this inner game that I've been missing.
Yes.
What's been wrong, I felt the same way when I was going through, I had kind of got to this big brass ring and we sold the company and it was like amazing for a week or whatever. And then we were
right.
Wait, now what? Now what's the point? And like all these things I thought were going to be fixed about my existence are just, it's the same. And that's your kind of society promises all these things of like, and there's always some reason to look to the future, but then when you achieve that, sometimes then it's not different. And then for me,
No.
that triggered a big self re-examination.
Yeah. What year was that?
Well, we sold our company in 2014 to Amazon. And then really when I started going through this was probably around 2018. So maybe
Yeah.
3 years ago, when
Yeah.
I was kind of at this rock bottom place where I felt like I was just as stressed as ever. And it didn't really make
Yeah.
sense to me because I was like, well, I've accomplished way beyond what I ever thought I would.
Right.
And things like are supposed to be great. And like, but I'm like super stressed out and I don't feel like things are great. And why is that? And I was always I realized something about myself, which is that I had always looked to the external circumstances to drive something internal for me. Like if something, I thought if
100%.
this thing in the world changes, if I have a $1 billion company or a $10 billion company, or I raise this much money, or I'm like this famous, or I have this many Twitter followers, or whatever, silly thing like that, then I'll finally be right with myself. And I just realized like I should have realized it a long time ago, but after like the message repeated over and over and over again, I was like, oh, maybe it's not the external circumstances that are going to drive some form of internal peace. Maybe that has to
Right.
come from within. So went on probably a similar journey to you. It's just like I went deep into, meditation and reading about Buddhism and all the books, and just trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what are the things I could do every day in my life to
Yeah.
to be happy and to find peace. And yeah, I resonate with your journey a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that sounds really familiar. And I don't know if you feel this way, but like I've found the journey of the last, I guess it'd be 4 years now, like more compelling than any journey I've been on. Like it's so fascinating to realize that you can change your own brain, that you can alter in these fundamental ways your experience. And it's such a deep dive. It's so cool. Like there's so many other things to explore. Like I don't know if you've ever done like psilocybin ceremonies or ayahuasca or anything like that, but like there's this
Yeah.
whole there's
Yes.
this whole I figured um, there's this whole rich world of both the collective and also the sort of inner power you can have over your own experience. And if I would have known, and this isn't how it goes, right? But if I would have known that that I could alter the way that I experience life and have the kind of experience that I have now, which isn't perfect, right? Like
Yeah.
things still come up, but just night and day from the way that I used to feel. I don't know if I would have. I mean, I still want. I don't know. I think probably you feel this way too. I always want to be ambitious, and I'm always working on something, and I always want the success factor, but it takes on a different form now.
Yeah. You don't need it to be that way.
No.
It's not as grippy, and you're not like the meditation metaphor I always use is, I used to be in the river all the time. If my thoughts and experiences and our river, I used to be sucked along the river all the time. And then now I'm like watching it
Same.
go by, and I still have that experience.
Totally.
I actually had that on my list of questions to ask you is like, I love that lifestyle. I partied. I love gambling actually. And I'm curious, like, do you still get that dopamine high from are you completely out of the lifestyle, or do you still like think about that and like, oh man, like I can enjoy it, once in a while as somebody who's gone down the spiritual path, I was curious about that.
So it's interesting. I mean, I guess I still crave adrenaline and dopamine for sure.
Yeah.
And in some ways that's this pandemic has forced me to examine that. And like, I don't know, I feel like when you get some sort of spirituality or some well-being, all of a sudden you think you're like this great sage, you're like, I know everything. And then the pandemic happens and you're like, oh, actually, I am still so reliant on the external world. And, so but to go back to your question, I still am an adrenaline, dopamine fiend junkie, but I just get it from different places now. I
Yeah.
get it from heli skiing, or going, like, traveling Africa by myself and doing all these crazy, like, trips or whatever. Or thinking about ways, big, creative, scalable ways to spread goodness and solution, and just it's a different outlet, of adrenaline and dopamine. But I still think, and what the pandemic forced me to realize is that I was a little too reliant still on those events happening, all the time, and I was having a hard time facing just, ordinary life,
Yeah.
without and so it forced me to reckon with that. Um, and because I've gotten sober, because I have gone through these processes of changing myself, I know that the way is to let yourself feel uncomfortable and do nothing about it, you
Yeah.
know, to just, like, let it change you. And so that's what I did during the pandemic. Like, for a while I was like, I need to go to Costa Rica. I was like, I just need to go somewhere. And I was like, oh, but this, like, level of reliance, the fact that I'm not okay inside, means that there's some work to do here. So instead of going to Costa Rica, or doing anything, I just stayed with it and then found peace in it.
No, I absolutely know that experience of being with your discomfort and just learning about it and sitting with it and
Yeah.
using it as a practice and accepting it and realizing, oh, that's just part of the experience of being human, is to
Right.
have this, like, desire to do something, or like this need to do something, or compulsion or whatever, but being able to be present with it and not need it to be any different. That's been like
Life changing.
huge life changer for me. Yeah.
Me too.
I wanted to go back to ayahuasca because it's like one of my favorite things to talk about, and psilocybin. I I had a big experience. I mean, that was really one of the formative experiences that set me on that path of, I would say, like, greater consciousness of my own behaviors. So,
Yeah.
really understanding, why am I the type of person who needs to be accepted by, everybody around me, and
Right.
that's driving me to do all these things. I had this big ayahuasca experience where I kind of learned that about myself and saw, like, for the first time, oh, I didn't feel like I got that approval from my family or from my peers when I was younger. And so that I'm just playing out that cycle today as an adult.
You saw that in ayahuasca ceremony? That's so cool.
Yeah, I was like, well, what happened? I mean, I've talked about a little bit on the podcast before, but I didn't know anything about what to expect. I just been I would say, recreational psychedelic user.
Yeah.
And I tried it and was like, okay, this is really cool and magical. But a friend of mine told me about ayahuasca, and I just showed up. My wife and I actually just showed up, and we didn't, like, really know anything. We were not prepared, we didn't know what was going to happen. Yeah, I know. It's like, and then, it's kind of a funny story. So we walk in, and it's this beautiful house in California, on the coast, and walked in, and there's this young guy who's like maybe my age, in a Robin Hood hoodie, like the stock trading app, like this white guy. And that's like the assistant shaman, right? And I'm like, this is like I know, I was like, this is some Silicon Valley shit right here. Like, this is like, is this legit? I don't know. And so I know so 9 o'clock rolls around, and they're like, okay, everybody, sit in a circle. We're going to do a ceremony. And I'm like, ceremony, like, then there's like this Peruvian shaman guy who's like the main guy, like, what is going on? But I'm pretty open-minded. So I'm like, okay, let's just try it. Like, I'll try anything once, I'm kind of similar to you. I like to chase experiences. And so I was like, all right, let's just do it. And we sit down, and they kind of beckon you up one at a time. Right. And well, first they're like, he does sages the room and sings some Icaros, and like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but like, it's my turn to come up, and I come up, and they hand me this cup of ayahuasca. All right, cheers, drink it. And it tastes horrible, like jungle cough syrup or whatever. And then I just sit down and in silence, would just wait for whatever 30 minutes and nothing happened. I didn't feel like anything was happening. And then I remember at the beginning, like, in the beginning of the thing, they were like, if you can conceive of having a second cup, then you can come up and have another cup at a certain point. We'll call you up. And I forgot the cardinal rule of psychedelics, which is like when you think, or it's pretty much all drugs, really. It's like when you think that it's not working,
Right.
and you should just take more drugs.
Double down.
Just wait. Like,
yeah.
wait.
No,
yeah. And so I was like, all right. Like they were like, does anyone want a second cup? And I basically sprint up there like, nothing's working for me. It's not working. And my assistant shaman, who's like, he's translating for the Peruvian shaman whose family was all curanderos from Peru. And he's like, oh, he doesn't, feel anything. So they, eyeball me and like pour in another big dose in this cup and then hand it to me and I drink it. I know. And then I sit down and immediately like it kicks into the most wild, insane night I've ever had in my life. And, it was basically like the scenes of 3 different movies all cut together. One was like just in therapy, one where it was like, I saw my dad appeared in front of me and I'm like screaming at my dad, like, why aren't you proud of me yet? And, my dad, great dad, but like somewhere I had this like lost in translation where like I had clearly this kind of complex and then like that was like exhausting. And then my mom would appear, then my wife or brothers or whoever, like it just went down the list of like all the people in my life. And then there was one part that was just the insane psychedelic visualizations. It was almost like being in the movie Tron.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then there was this moment of these scenes of like, almost like the perfect storm, right? Like I was like super sick and throwing up in this bucket, freaking out, and then going from there to moments of extreme groundedness and calm. But afterwards, I woke up 5 a.m. I have my arm through the wrong hole of my jacket, pool of my own sweat, like on the floor, just like shivering, like what happened? And my wife and I were like, we gotta get the fuck out of here and go home. Like this is like way too much. And eventually like we actually ended up staying and doing the second night. But like the real fascinating thing for me was like those scenes from like my family and with my relationships. As I processed them the next year, I really integrated that and realized like, oh, like these are real things that you feel and that you are beneath the surface. Like they were beneath the surface of consciousness and you were acting out these unconscious behaviors and you have been. And that was the first step for me of choosing, oh, okay. The first step was like, I accept that part of myself. That part was there. Right. The desire to be approved of by other people. That's there for me to, to help me be successful or whatever, help me have motivation. And I can love that part. And then now, is that how I want to be in the world, moving forward?
Right. Yeah. Right. So cool. So powerful. And, those substances are they go so deep. It's hard to imagine ever being able to have the realizations in talk therapy that you can have when you, in the right context, when you go on one of those journeys, man, it's just life-changing.
I know. What was your experience with it?
My experience was with the deepest experience I had was actually in a psilocybin ceremony.
Yeah.
Similar story, Southern California shaman and, drives BMW, whatever. But facilitated this really powerful experience in which I was basically reliving scenes in my life like you described that needed resolving,
No.
Having deep, I wouldn't even know if I would call them conversations, but just getting like almost like imbued with wisdom about self, about the world, about really like obscure questions that existential questions about things, and just kind of absorbing all this information and learning truly about surrender.
Yeah.
Because in those like reels or rooms where you have to, where you're so uncomfortable and you're having dialogue, or you have to like let some emotion pass through. I fought it so hard, so for hours, and then finally like learned about surrender, which has been incredibly helpful to carry into the world. And so, yeah, just a really profound experience. I want to, I think it's something that is like, I want to do like, X amount of times per year. Not crazy. I'm not going to get addicted about it.
Yeah. And I agree.
But,
I think it's been a huge benefit to me in terms of just having that reset, and that's the surrender, that experience of surrender, and afterwards having like a deep sense of equanimity that has come from it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So what are you, what are you working on now? Like what's the, how's, after the movie, and some of these like kind of investments into wellness and yourself, like who's the Molly Bloom of today?
After the movie, I spent 2 years traveling the world and speaking. I was getting invited all kinds of crazy places. Like I did this tour in Africa, and I went to like the DRC and Lagos, Nigeria, and I got picked up in armored cars, and then they would take me to this little like expat place in the middle of the city. And I would just like, I don't know, it was very cool. I went to the Middle East, I went to Europe, and I even went to like Kuwait and talked about drugs, alcohol, gambling, like hope and redemption.
Yeah.
And so it was this really incredible opportunity to see the world again, and to be able to talk about second chances and normalize failure, and express to people how deeply and passionately I believe in as many second chances as you need,
Yeah.
And just kind of share this message. So, and then, as I'm on these speaking tours, of course, I'm thinking about like, what's the next thing, and it started to shape in my mind, but I was so busy that it wasn't until the pandemic happened that I was really able to start to work these things out. So I'm working on my second book now, and my husband's a neuroscientist, and he is also in recovery. And so, that's just to say that both of us have gone through like really extraordinary changes. And so we're both super fascinated with behavior change, behavior modification, and how to solve for the latency and motivation. So I kind of started putting this idea together to build out these immersive experiences online that help solve for that motivation latency. So to make it more immersive, and so we're in the early stages of building out this technology, and it's interesting. I get to apply all the things that I've learned from the past, from gaming to storytelling, to being the hero and the hero's journey, to these habits that we create to change our life and our experience and make things better. And kind of, I get to apply it all to this project. So that's what I'm working on now.
I'm so fascinated because it's once again, it's like really parallel my own experience, where I'm like,
yeah,
once I started making behavior change in myself, I was like, this is something I should work on, because it's so helpful to me.
Right.
And I created this habit formation app. That was it's like a streak tracker. That's like a social streak tracker. So people can kind of support each other in adopting whatever habit they want to adopt. But that's the kind of technology that helped me quit drinking a couple of years ago. Is like every day I'd open this app and press this button, and that was just like a tiny bit of motivation for me, to like
Totally.
stay sober.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and so I'm like, what are you building? I'm curious. I want to learn about it.
Yeah. Well, I can send you, I'll send you I'm right now I'm working with animators to make a trailer for it.
Yeah.
Because I just really think that like I can see it in my head. It's harder for me to sit and pitch it in a room, but you'd understand it. But basically it's like an experience that kind of puts you as the hero into the hero's journey. And then you go through these levels that have real life requirements for behavior change. And then, there's a community aspect. And I just, I think about what I would have wanted when I was doing all these things, which is just a little bit more immersive, a little bit more of an experience than what I used out there. But we'll see. It's still pretty early stages, but I'll definitely send you what I have when I finish the trailer.
Yeah. Let me know how I can help. I love it. I love that.
Okay.
That mission.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I'm also curious, like, how's your relationship evolved with your family? It seemed like you had a lot to prove in the, kind of early 2000s to them, and then, maybe hit rock bottom, and like, what's it like now? How do you relate to them now?
So my relationship with my mom has always been solid. She's just always shown up. She's that person, super kind, super compassionate. When I was at my most broken and, she was just like, I'm just glad I can be your soft place to land. Like, she's that person, My dad and I had a really tough relationship growing up. And we talk about these stories that we create in our heads, and he was really hard on me and I was really hard on him,
Yeah.
And so I had this story in my head that he liked my brothers better than me. And it was because they were successful. They were these shiny overachievers that were, my brother was the best in the world at 19 in the sport that my father loved. And my other brother, was going to Harvard. Like it was, I just, I always just thought that he loved them more, and that ripped me apart. It really broke my heart. And and my dad used to write me letters every year, pleading with me to stop running these games and telling me that what I was doing was reckless and, that I was going to get in trouble. So when I got arrested by the FBI, he was mad.
Yeah.
And then looking back, I was like, well, no shit, he was mad. But at the time I was like, how can you be mad at me right now? I just got arrested by the FBI. I need my dad,
Yeah.
We didn't talk for a year. And he called me before sentencing and he said, listen, I'm going to that sentencing with you and we need to hash this out. And so he and I hashed it out. And I asked him the question that I was always afraid of asking him, which is, why did you like my brothers better than you liked me? And, the scene takes place in the movie, but the answer in real life is a bit different. The answer, what he said in real life was, first of all, he was like, you were a pain in the ass, which I was. I rebelled against any type of authority. Like, I had a huge attitude. Like, I was a nightmare. Okay. But he said, but second of all, I've been a therapist, right? I'm a psychologist. I've seen people in psychotherapy for 20, 30 years. And I know that the world's really tough. And I wanted to make you tough. I wanted to make you formidable. And it was kind of like in that moment, I realized that this huge story I had concocted in my head was completely false. And every bit of my relationship with my dad was built into this story. And after we had that like very honest conversation, that very vulnerable conversation, it all dissolved. The story that I had, and now my dad is I have the relationship with my dad that I always wanted as a kid, you know. He's like my biggest cheerleader and we're so close. Um, and you know, I think I'm probably the favorite kid now
Yeah.
because I got Costner to play my dad in a movie, you know, and those overachievers never did that. I'm just kidding. Um, it's not so important to me to be the favorite kid anymore. You know, and then also in terms of my family, you know, during my amends process when I got sober, um, the way that I dealt with being so mad at myself for all of the shit I had done and having so much guilt is living amends, you know? Like that can really take the place. That's a less selfish application of guilt if you are willing to just live in a way that you're making up for your past behavior. So, you know, as a consequence, I have the best relationship with my family now.
That's so beautiful. I really,
Yeah.
I love that story, and the willingness to just kind of ask that challenging question, but then and accept that, like kind of move to a place of like acceptance and love from that, and like
Right.
realize that like, oh yeah, no, he was coming from a place of love, and like to accept and love him for almost for that, even though that was a difficult
Yeah.
experience for you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like everybody who's listening can learn something from that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a very powerful moment for sure.
Wow, Molly, thank you. Thanks for being so vulnerable. That was amazing.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
I think that's pretty much all I had on my that I wanted to talk about. Is there I don't know, anything else that came up for you that you want to talk about or mention?
I feel like we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. Well, oh, actually, one more thing I am curious about is like,
Yeah.
what kind of meditation do you do?
Oh, yeah. I mostly do Vipassana, like breath meditation.
No.
I mean, what I'm trying to do when I sit is strengthen that cognitive or that part of me that um, can detach from the thoughts, you know, or
Yeah.
observe the thoughts.
Yeah.
So to sort of like create that separation. And so, you know, the best way that I found to do that really sort of creates that separation and puts me in that seat of witness is just to focus on breath, you know,
Yeah.
focus on like something that's in the present moment, and stay out of the thought life, or, you know, like observe it and choose what you want to get hooked on or not. What
Yeah.
about you?
Same. I've been doing this form of meditation called universal mindfulness, which is based. I mean, it's basically Vipassana by Shinzen Young, created by Shinzen Young, and I've studied with one of his students.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
yeah, it's been really helpful to just try to rest in awareness and see everything arising and passing. And like you said, creating that separation has been like the most important part for me. So, because I feel like I was someone who's always swept along and always triggered, not in a bad way, but always like I was just reactive to whatever was coming up, and being able to say, oh, like
Yeah.
it's coming, and then I see it arise and then pass, and I can choose.
Right.
That's been, I think, the most important skill I've ever learned, actually.
Me too.
Yeah.
100%. There's actually no question in my mind about that for sure.
Yeah.
And then do you practice during the day, kind of trying to exist in that mind state?
Yeah, so I have this bracelet. It's this red bracelet here, and every time I look, it's like my totem. It's like every time I look at this bracelet, I just go back to like, what is your present moment experience? Like,
Cool.
what's it in my body? What's my any emotions? Like, what am I hearing? What am I seeing? And then trying to go zoom back out to awareness. Because it's so easy to, probably for people like you and I, it's like who are excited about ideas or new things or chasing experience. It's easy to like get caught up in like going down some rabbit hole, and then back out has been really important for me.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Yeah, meditation has just been like, I used to have this ridiculous fear of flying, and I fly all the time, but turbulence during flying, like I thought I was going to die every time. So irrational, so counter to the rest of my personality. But I and it was, I was like, I didn't know how to get on a plane without a Xanax.
Yeah.
And then I would say a couple months of meditating, and I was able to completely eliminate that phobia. I've had insomnia my whole life. Meditation addressed insomnia. The list goes on and on and on and on. I feel that with and it's daily, right? I think like what is important to understand about meditation is it's not crisis medicine.
Yeah.
It's strengthening your mind in this way daily. Has had a bigger has transformed my life in just exponential ways. Any stage I'm ever on, they're going to hear about meditation. I just think it's so important.
Yeah. It's like one of those kind of fundamental, it's like exercise. Like everyone should be
Right.
exercising, right? Like as a
Yeah.
part of maintaining your body and your health, and it's exercise for the mind.
Yeah, totally.
Love that.
Yep. I'm with you on that for sure.
The last thing that we usually do is bring up one of our guests to ask any audience questions. So maybe I can see if they want to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Look, it's Serena.
Hi, Serena.
Hey, Molly. So nice to meet you. And
You
thanks for this wonderful opportunity. Molly, I just wanted to let you know, all the Quest fellows have been fangirling you since day one.
Oh, you're so nice.
You're going to be coming on the pod. So thank you so much for joining. And thank you,
Yeah,
Jess,
absolutely.
for the opportunity. I think I'm just really appreciative towards how much you're willing to share your vulnerabilities in front of a group of strangers, basically, right? And this pod will be shown to a group of strangers. So thank you so much for that. And thank you, Justin, for housing this safe conversation. Question I have for you: do you still want to chase after any sort of accomplishments nowadays, or how does that play out for you?
Yes, I think that is part of my DNA and will be always. But I kind of see it through a different lens than I used to. Whereas in the poker days, in my sports days, every single thing I did, every thing I was doing was for me. It was for my own gain. It was for my own bank account, my own recognition. And what I realized is that that interpretation of success for me made me unwell. And I'm better. And so I know for sure that I will always be ambitious, but part of my success matrix has to involve some part of what I'm doing that benefits other people, that benefits something other than just me.
I was going to say that resonates with me so much in that, I had this experience where I realized like, wow, I've lived my whole life for 36 years trying to put myself at the center of things and be the man myself, and realize it was a choice. Like, oh, maybe I could choose to be of service to other people and make that kind of put that at the center. And
I had
like
the same
change. Yeah.
A huge change. And yeah, I mean, I feel so much better. And it's actually like, it helps with fearlessness too, because you're like, yeah, I'm going to build this. And if it doesn't fail, if it doesn't work, I built it from the best place, from this place of like, I want other people to be able to get free of the things that they struggle with. So I have this kind of fearlessness that I didn't have before with ambitions and endeavors that were just about, sort of benefiting myself. I have to practice self-abandonment over and over and over, like just continually giving it away, because I got so deep into the, self-obsession and ambition and who cares who I hurt, and and it made me so sick inside. So I just have to keep kind of practicing that.
Thank you, Molly. This is I was actually probably on the trajectory of doing something similar. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Don't do it, Serena.
This is so helpful.
I hope you're not talking about running poker games. If you are, sis, you need to call me. It doesn't end well. Although it's probably
yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Serena. Cool. This is an amazing conversation, Molly. Thank you. I really appreciate the vulnerability.
Yeah.
I love, it's so funny because I feel like there's so many parallels. Like I said,
there's so many parallels.
Yeah.
I felt the same way. Yeah. Hearing about your journey. Yeah. I was like, I have to reach out. Like we have had this journey is very similar.
So let's keep in touch and let me know how I can help on, what you're building now or, the future. I just really, it's cool to connect. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's definitely stay in touch.
Thank you so much. All right. This is going to be a great one. I know people are going to love this one.